equivalent as what we have as one of the books of the Old Testament. One writer going into a cave, getting a vision, and coming out and saying, I have declared by this vision that I got in the cave that I decree that this is the way it should be from this moment forward. Now, there's a lot of contradictory things that relate to when you compare the Old Testament and alone and the Gospels of Jesus Christ. There's very much, there's not a flow there. We came up, what we have with God-given, God-inspired Holy Bible today, we have because everything works and everything flows. Everything's connected together. We've talked about that here at our church. But when you look at what Muhammad got, it is not what we have today. And so there's not a place for this. This is not like, oh, he can just say he was just added as another prophet to the Old Testament. It does not align with what we teach today. So there is very much a difference, very contradictory, these two texts, the Quran and the Bible. And what he says and what he states is that these things are true, but the variable related to the Quran is this. The Quran embraces something that's called a progressive revelation. There's a word, nasik is word for it, that they use to reference the fact that it is a progressive revelation. In other words, what might have been true or you thought was true many, many years ago becomes more true as time reveals things, and we can see the full truth of the Quran as the years pass. It becomes a moving sort of document. It's like the argument that people have politically in America today. Should we just interpret the law as a judge the way it says, or should we let the law be progressive and change it as it goes? Well, the Islamic faith, or what we have in the Quran, they believe that the Quran is progressive and it can change as the times change and become more clear to us and its interpretation over time. Very much different than the Bible. In Matthew 1:22, it says this, all this took place, in our Bible it says, all this took place to what? What is that? To fulfill what the Lord has said through the prophet. The Old Testament prophecies, the virgin will be with child and will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. We have one person in the Quran, Muhammad, saying, you can add this, I'm large and in charge now. And then we have with scriptures and what we have all through the Old Testament and the New Testament saying that this Jesus will be the final fulfillment, and we don't add to anything after that. Amen. But the Quran does that. The Bible, as we said, written over 1,600 years. All the different authors in all the different countries and in all the different continents, as we talked about, and the proof related to the Bible, and all woven together, pointing to the very same thing and the very same story in the Quran. One person, one author, in a cave, to be trusted when he comes out. Very, very different portraits in the text as we examine them. Here's another way that you can examine the truth about another faith, is you can examine the leader of the movement. We have Jesus and we have Muhammad. And Muhammad declares himself this apostle. He declares this text that he's getting as right and true, and he says in the Quran, it says, or you should have a house of gold, or should ascend into heaven, and we will not believe in your ascending until you bring down to us a book which we may read. Say, glory to my God, am I aught but a mortal apostle? We know this, that the followers of Islam and Muhammad himself make a declaration time and time again that Muhammad was a right living person, that he was good, that maybe he was indeed holy. But when we examine the way somebody lived versus what they spoke about, we can get a closer look at the leader. In other words, it's one thing for us to say that this guy was holy and pure, but what about the way that he lived? Well, let me tell you a little bit about the way Muhammad lived. He recommended no more than 4 wives for each Muslim person. But he had 16, including one wife who was 6 years old. There's a lineage related to that 6-year-old wife. You should know that. This is not some fake news. This is legitimate. He had over 22 women, yet Muslims would say that he was sinless. He taught that women were inferior. If they disobeyed men, they were destined to hell. They were worth only half. He proclaimed to be a prophet, yet he did not do miracles. He never rose from the dead. He never proclaimed that he would rise from the dead. His message at times is without love, and he is a mortal man who died and was placed in a tomb. Jesus proclaimed to be the Son of God. He did not have sex with women, despite the fake news, weird stuff that they always try to talk about in the scripture, on these news networks. He was born of a virgin. He did perform miracles, and that is not disputed. He did perform miracles, and it is in the Jewish, as we talked about last week, in the Jewish antiquities, and it is also known in the Quran that Jesus did indeed perform miracles. He was a pure sacrifice. He did rise from the dead, and he did proclaim constantly love and inclusion. And what we know about what Jesus talked about with women was very honoring and very powerful. Matthew 26 and 62, though, it says this, is this moment of time has come for this sentencing of Jesus. The high priest said to him, I charge you under oath by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God.